Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you're ready to hear some tech leadership stuff now. Okay, so virtually joining us now, we have Janet Gregory, who I'm hearing is a guru in testing. So Janet Gregory is a testing and process consultant. She is the co-author with Lisa Crispin of Agile Testing Condensed, a brief introduction, published in 2019. And with the very same Lisa Crispin, she has founded the Agile Testing Fellowship to grow a community of practitioners who care about quality. So if you want to check this out, you can go to agiletestingfellow.com to find a bit more and about courses and membership. Okay, so hi Janet, and the stage is yours. Let's hear It's Never a Technology Problem, using experience to solve the problem. Round of applause.
Slideshow. There we go. But I'm still on that great big screen. It's a little bit scary for me. So let's get started. I'm trying something new today on my slides. I'm hoping that the subtitles start showing a little bit on the screen. I think they should be on now. Let's see, on, off, I don't know, we'll see.
We can see them.
Perfect, thank you. So let's start. I want to talk a little bit about me. That was a wonderful introduction and I loved it. But the things that go on behind the scene is kind of what I want to talk about today. So I started my career as a programmer right out of university. I spent about 6 years programming. My next career was a QA manager, and it was in a waterfall project. The reason I became a QA manager was because I was the only person, the only programmer who complained at all about the process or about the lack of quality of our product. So they thought I would be a good QA manager. But I realized pretty quickly that things weren't going to change in that organization. So I moved into Agile, which kind of changed everything I did, everything I thought. I started speaking, started talking about what I'd learned. And I even had written 4 books now. My latest one just came out last week, Assessing Quality Practices. So that's kind of where my career has taken me. But that tells you where I am now. And I want to back up a little bit because that's where this story starts. So my family spent 2 years overseas when my children were young, about grade 1, grade 3. When we came back, I was in a different place in my life. And I was at a crossroads. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I decided I'd go to university. I went to university as a mature student. So I have always been 20 years older than my counterparts who graduated with me. I also had other responsibilities, like my children. Now, my first interview out of university was I walked in, and there were 5 young men sitting across the table with me. A little scary for my first interview, but it was very obvious that I was not what they expected. I hadn't put my age on my resume, but they would have been able to figure it out if they had looked at my previous experience before university. And it became very clear that it would not be a good fit, no matter how much I knew. It was a very short interview. But my next interview was much different. The person who interviewed me was about my age. She looked at my university transcripts, so she could see what classes I'd take, what my grades were. But the interview was focused on my life experiences and what I could bring to the team. It was quite a bit different. She took a chance on a middle-aged woman who had no tech experience, but a lot of life experience. And that started my career as a programmer. So that takes you back to that last slide. And that's kind of where most people know me from. I'm programming. I want to start with a little bit of fun here. If everyone was virtual, I'd probably do a poll or just put you in the chat. But you're all out in the audience and you're looking at this in the big screen. So think about it in your own mind, right? And be honest when I ask you the question. What is your first, I'm going to ask you a few questions. So your first question, I need to know how to add a field in Jira or whatever system you're using to track stories or bugs. Which person would you go ask? I'll bet you didn't choose number 1, 3, or 7, right? The new grad probably wouldn't know, but maybe she does because maybe she did grad work in a defect tracking system. You never quite know. Now, number 2 question. Who would you go to if you wanted to write and publish a book? Who did you choose? And why? Think about that. Now, what I can tell you is both number 6 and number 7 have both written and published books. Were they even contenders for you? What about if I want to create a website? Who would you ask? Did it depend on whether it's a personal website or one for work? Would that make a difference for you? Why did you choose that person? What about if you want to know how to pass a test? To me, that's an easy one. I would probably ask number 3 because she's just graduated from, I can't tell whether it's high school or university, but she's likely written a lot of tests and would be able to help me. We tend to assume. We assume things about people just by looking at them, by the way they dress, by the way they present themselves, by their age. And we all have our own biases. Now, let me tell you a story. Maybe not so long ago, depending on your perspective. When I started my first job in 1991, 92, 30 years ago, that's scary to me. I was a newbie. I was the junior. It didn't matter that I was older than most of my colleagues. Senior did not mean age. Now, my supervisor took his shepherding job very, very seriously. Every morning, he would come to my desk. He would ask me what I was doing for the day, how I was planning on testing what I was going to do. And then he checked in at the end of the day, especially at first. He came back around and asked me how I did. Did I have any issues? How was I programming? Did I test what I coded? And how did I test? He was there to keep me out of trouble. The emphasis was on learning as much as I could from the seniors around me, the people who knew more than me. It was about getting more experience before I could start contributing or promoting my own ideas. Now, I was very lucky that it wasn't very long before people started asking me for opinions. Although I really was I hesitated, I was scared to offer suggestions. And that's because I was new. Today, it feels like many of those fresh young developers who have the latest tech, right? They come out of university and They know all of this stuff and they can solve problems faster because they're contributing. They know this, the tech. They've been living with it day to day. And it feels like sometimes that they think the slower, the older people need to get out of the way. Sometimes it feels like years of experience is a hindrance. That sometimes they think, if you're as good as you say you are, how come you're not working at, some cool company? Now, this talk is not about dissing technology. Technology is important. It's here to stay, but it has changed over the years. When I first was working as a newbie, we used things like MVS and COBOL, mainframes using vSAN, things that you probably will never hear of unless you're working in COBOL. But then, Visual Basic come along, 5 and 6, and it supplanted COBOL. I know COBOL still exists, but it was the cool new tech. And then Java, and it just keeps going and going. Now, my first job was in COBOL, even though I didn't take it at university, and I'm not a fan, and so when the program, when I had a chance to program in C, I jumped at it. But many of the things I learned while programming in COBOL were transferable to C. Basic fundamentals like avoiding spaghetti quote, which can be done in any language, just easier in some. Today, the development stacks feel like they're changing monthly, if not almost daily. There are new languages, there are new tools, there's new frameworks. It almost makes me dizzy. And teams seem to want to rush out to the new cool stuff and leave the old stuff behind. Now, that's not always a bad thing, except the basic problems never seem to change. The problems we tried to change now are very much the same ones we were trying to change 30 years ago. So think about it. That COBOL that I was writing, I spent 3 months one time just documenting a program so we could change it. After I finished documenting, they realized it was unchangeable. So sad. But today, how many systems have to be rewritten because they're a monolith and don't fit into today's technology paradigm? We're doing a lot of the same thing. Technology has helped us speed up solutions and different things, but there's still a lot of the same problems to overcome. Now, again, this talk is not about dissing technology or young people either. It's about thinking, how to approach problems using the people around you, the experience around you. I've been fortunate enough in my journey, and I'm not sure if I've just been lucky or people didn't think I was old. Maybe it's because I've written books and that gives me credibility. I really don't know. But working with a lot of different companies over the years, I've seen and heard things like that stodgy old fellow over there. Or, that old lady, she doesn't know this from that. I, in fact, get it from my own children who sometimes laugh at my struggle with something new. And yes, as we age, we slow down. It's inevitable. You will too. But we're not dumb. And for those who don't know, I'm not going to tell you my age, but I will tell you I have a 17-year-old granddaughter. So I am a senior. We have many years of experience. I like to think of it as wisdom sometimes, but we'd like to share it. But people have to choose to listen. Now, there will be some old folks who have heard the same thing again and again, new tools, new processes, but see the same results. They've become resistant to change because they really haven't seen anything new. But it's not just the old people. I've seen that same attitude in all ages and all walks of life. And again, this talk is not about biases, at least not overtly. I think these are a couple of useful quotes to remember. The technology is really only as good as the people who created it and use it. So don't let it be more important than the people. Technology is here to serve. Now, if your team is all the same age and all the same type of experience, no matter if you have different ethnic backgrounds or different genders, you still lack diversity. When we think about technology to solve all our problems, sometimes we forget how to serve the people, our customers. So there's a couple of examples that I could share, but I'll only share one today. Canada and COVID, right? Their government, in its infinite wisdom, I just complain about their governments, right? Decided to have this new app called ArriveCan. It's in your vaccination records and upload when you're coming in and all these kinds of things so that it would be easier to cross. However, you had to have a smartphone to access it. You had to have the ability to have a smartphone. Now, there's a lot of people in Canada, so we're north. If I look out my window today, I have about this much snow, and it's minus 17. It's cold, it's winter. So we have a lot of retired people that go south, me included. I like to go south, to Southern California, Southern Arizona, someplace warm. But these people, we call them snowbirds, often they purchase just a throwaway phone, almost a cheap phone purchased in the US because this phone plan is really expensive, probably the highest in the world. So they use this cheap phone to talk to their kids, or they use their computers, Wi-Fi. So they don't carry smartphones. They don't have access to this app. So what that meant was when they came back into Canada, there was significant delays, and sometimes they were turned away at the border. Now, that's a preventable thing if we thought about our people. This was a really good example of technology not serving the people or all of the people. Now, but let's move on. When I choose tools, when I go into a company and we need to choose tools, I always look at the process first. And then I try to find the tool that helps with the process. That's a whole nother talk. Sometimes we need to fix the process first, because maybe adding the tool will make it worse. So I'm going to go walk through a couple of process examples of problems that I see that teams automatically try to solve with technology. The examples I'm sharing are from my own experience. I have seen these, and sometimes more than once. You may have seen them as well, or maybe something similar. Maybe at the end, maybe we can share some. Now, I can't even count the number of ways I've seen this particular problem. We need a way to track test cases. Yes, let's put it into Jira. Perhaps you were using spreadsheets. Been there, done that. And it becomes cumbersome. Or maybe somebody says, we need to keep the test cases close to each story. Whatever the reason, it's a technology solution. The second example, A team wants to automate. They know they need automation because maybe they can't keep up to the fast pace of the developer's coding. And what I see happen too many times is they go out and find a new tool, usually the coolest tool that somebody has read about, or maybe they've seen at a conference, and it does everything. It's magic. And then they hire some contractors to come in and automate all those manual scripted tests. This strategy fails because when those folks have finished, or even before they have finished, likely somebody has realized that it's too hard to maintain. Nobody knows how to fix it, and then it falls into disrepair, and the team is back to where they started. The third example is continuous delivery. That's the coolest new term, or continuous deployment. Everyone is doing it. We should be doing it too. Otherwise, we won't be in the know and people won't want to come and work here. So what do I see teams do? They usually start by reading. That's a good thing, right? They look to see what tools they need. If they don't have continuous integration, they're going to make sure they get that. And there are still teams that do not have continuous integration, right? That's a starting point. They might go and get Jenkins or TeamCity or any one of the other huge amount of tools out there. And they get that continuous integration going. They can check in their code, but maybe they forget that the magic happens when they have the automated unit tests, when they have automated tests to go with it. So maybe the team can manage that on their own, but then they start needing more. They need this deployment pipeline, and they realize they don't have the knowledge. They can't figure it out. So they hire a person or persons to set it up for them. But again, what happens is they don't have the necessary tests. So the pipeline is not effective, and they struggle to get those tests up and working with it. Maybe they don't even have stable test environments, or they don't know how to virtualize. It could be that their whole infrastructure does not work to deploy small chunks, so the whole thing fails. So they have these cool new tools that somebody has built, but the team is not taking advantage of it because they don't understand. So before you choose technology, step back. As experienced people, us older folks, we've probably seen these problems before. Maybe not exactly like it, but similar. We've seen things fail many times. We don't say slow down. We don't say it to be mean or to get in your way. We are trying to save you from the heartache that we have felt before. Sometimes the problems are because people or the team doesn't understand the core need or the intent that we're supposed to solve. So we need to dig down to find out what the real problem is. Why are we trying to do this? What is the goal? I find that enough time isn't spent on observing what is currently going on. I like to visualize. I draw pictures. I find that pictures are worth, 1,000 words, right? So visualize where you are. Visualize where you want to be. And then think about the gaps. Then and only then should you start thinking about possible solutions. And the solutions may include technology. They likely will. We can have all the tools, techniques in the world, things like that I talk about all the time, user stories, acceptance test-driven development. But as I read on LinkedIn about a week ago, the lack of collaboration is an adaptive problem. It is not a technical problem. So I want to look at some of those possible solutions to some of those examples that I talked about. First, the problem number one, need a way to track test cases. So understand that real problem and the goal. Depending on why you want to track test cases, you may choose different solutions. So observe, why are the test cases, or how are they created? Who creates them? What do they look like? What kinds of tests? How complex are they? So visualize, think holistically about the tests. Maybe use a model like the Agile testing quadrants. Maybe different types of tests require different ways to track. And this isn't something anybody wants to do on their own. You want to involve the team so you have different perspectives. Ask, do they need to be automated? Do we need a tool? Or are they meant to be human-centric tests? A person executes them. For example, if we want to understand what's being tested, coverage for both automated and human-centric tests, and we don't even know what tests are being run, then maybe we have to go back a little bit, thinking about how are they stored? How are we going to, right? Perhaps we have really good automation already for unit tests, and maybe some at the API level for business rules, but we want a way to track our exploratory testing. Whatever the real problem is, understand it so you choose the appropriate solutions. And I'm going to show you a couple of non-technical solutions now. So this is a very simple logon example, right? Everybody knows this one. And I only put a few tests on it. I find that creating a mind map with the whole team really helps, because you'd be surprised how many more test ideas when you have diversity. Programmers, testers, domain experts, they all have different ideas, but also having different ages. Different ideas come out when you have diversity. A simple mind map can also be used for tracking if you don't have automation for, right? It can be used for short-term tracking. For example, the leaves on the mind map, they're individual tests. We can check, yes, it passed. No, it didn't. We have something wrong with this one, right? Some of the ideas that come out on a mind map are not single tests. For example, all those language characters. That's probably better as an exploratory test charter. Again, not technology related. I can use technology to help build the mind map. I can use technology to help me explore, but it really is human-centric thinking behind it. So exploratory testing, right? I like to use a charter. Elizabeth Hendrickson's book, Explore It, uses this format. Explore. What are you exploring with? To resources, different variations, to discover. Using test charters gives the explorers some guidance on what to test and what to look for. But it's a people problem. You use your intuition, and your experience will help guide you. If we look at a exploratory test charter for the login, that, right, those usernames, different character sets, right? You want it to be vague enough so anybody who picks it up will test a bit differently. So this one, you exploring usernames with different international character sets to discover if there's any that aren't accepted. I could give that to 5 different people and they would test 5 different ways. Exploratory testing is where experience shows its strength. Although sometimes having a newbie testing will give very interesting results. It's a different way to find different bugs. And remember, the problem was to track test cases. So we may need to think of a way to track these charters? Can we put them in a file system and name them really well so that we can find them? We need to be able to see the results, the notes. How are we going to do that? This is not necessarily a JIRA problem or solution. So let's go on to the next problem. Determining automating your tests, right? So you need to think again, step back, slow down. Why do we want to automate? What do we want to automate? One model which has helped me with teams trying to figure out is the test automation pyramid, right? Because we want to think about what kinds of tests we have. So if we visualize them, right? A good exercise for teams is to use the test automation pyramid. And there's lots of them out there. Use whichever one you want. I don't care. You can use a different model. The idea is to visualize, to have a conversation. We want to determine what tests you have and then discuss what layer you think they belong in. Where should we automate? Should we automate at the unit test level, right? So this is an example of the login, a simple login. Look how many tests there are, right? When you have all the tests and at the different layers, then think about who's going to be doing this, right? At the unit test level, the programmers most likely because they're responsible, well, are coding. At the workflow tests through the user interface. Perhaps the testers or automator can do those. You'll figure it out on your team. But that middle layer, the API level, where you're testing the business rules, and to me, where this is really powerful, I find that when the programmer and tester collaborates, so the testers maybe define the tests, they happen to be really good at that, and the programmers automate, they're really good at coding. That's when the magic happens, because the team takes responsibility for the automation. So once you know your priorities and what you're going to do, then you can start looking for the tools that meet your needs. And you can start automating, because you likely will need 3 different tools that do these 3 different layers. Not necessarily, but you want to know what you're looking for. When you start thinking about automating, start with the simplest thing, maybe your unit tests, maybe some workflow tests to give you a safety. But when you start to go into deeper in that middle layer, the API level, don't just go automate your workflows, your manual workflows, because you're going to run into trouble. Do some research. Think about your test patterns. What makes a good automated test, right? What are the pitfalls? Then start automating, and you will have better chance of success. All right, time check, we're good. The last problem that I wanted to talk about was this continuous delivery. It's the coolest new thing. Stop, slow down, ask, do we even need continuous delivery? Will it help us? Do we need continuous deployments? So again, visualize, what does your current workflow look like? Observe. I have gone into many organizations and talked to the team, and then I draw out what their workflow looks like. And then we look at it again and we'll go, no, that's not quite right. And it takes time. But think about it from the time the developer starts writing code to the final release to the customer. That's your workflow. Everyone has some kind of a pipeline, how they do their work, how they check in code, how they merge, how they test, they fix, how they actually release. It might be very simple with no automation at all. Builds are done by the developers manually, deployed manually. It's a starting point. There'll be different environments. right? From the developer's local machine to the production environment. So look at what tests currently exist. Where do they run? Are they automated? Why do we have trouble with releasing? What can we do to change? So draw your current situation and then start thinking about where you would like to be. What tests do you need to run? How are we going to get there? What steps need to be taken? It's important that everyone be part of the conversation because you need that diversity to think about what do you need? Different people have different experiences that you can draw on. It might be, we tried that. It didn't work then, but maybe now we could do it again because we have different kinds of tools. I find that something simple like this, it's a test suite canvas. I learned about it from Ashley Hansberger, is a way to identify your tests. Think about what you need to get from them, why you need them, who's going to be responsible. So thinking like and using something like this will give you a really good start. So slow down, know your process, and then use your technology. Slowing down doesn't mean nothing happens. I think of it as a pay me now, pay me later. If we stop, spend a bit of time thinking and attacking the problem with common sense, we will likely keep ourselves from spending time, hours and hours, fixing the problem later. Usually it is much harder to fix later. So think about it now. So old people aren't against technology. In fact, we've probably seen more technology changes and basic technology changes than any other generation. Although, you know, not all of us, including me, have seen a horse and buggy, and except in parades and things, right? But the reason that technology will never solve the real problems is because we use the technology as temptation, right? To fix it when the problem is underlying. The problem is in the process. The problem is in what we want to solve and not understanding the problem in the first place. Now, I don't expect you to read this all, but the highlighted piece is important. We don't want to be so dependent on technology that you forget how to remember. You forget how to be creative. The power of diversity using all ages, the young, the old, in between, the power of thinking and working together to find solutions, that's the magic. So just think before we jump into that easy technical solution. Diversity is not only a matter of gender and race and lots of other things, but age and experience. So ask those people around you. Ask if they can help. Look for different solutions. And be creative. When I love this picture, so I put it up here. Wasn't really sure if it fit, but I thought I put it in there because when I saw it, I thought, how many people would take a chainsaw to these beautiful trees to make a path and cut down the trees on one side versus having a nice wandering path, which makes for a much more gentle walk and makes you slow down and enjoy life. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be having questions after. My contact information is here. I welcome emails. You can visit my websites. You can contact me on Twitter. And yes, I'm still on Twitter. I like to have emails and questions asked to me. And this is some of the resources that I mentioned as I was going through. I think the slides will be available to you so that you can have these. And with that, I think we have a little bit of time for questions. So I am going to end the stop share and we can have questions.
And I'm here with the microphone. So there might be a slight
Perfect.
delay, everyone, but raise your hands if you have any. Or I will begin if, oh, there we have one. Okay, Janet, I'm bringing the microphone. Let us know if you can hear them properly.
Yep. Okay,
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Well, I know quite a few people which are way older than me, spend their lives in IT and know a lot. I know they know a lot. I can go to them and ask questions, but I would like to convince them to share what they know on a presentation like this, on conferences. And I know that it's really, really hard to convince them. And we are, as you said, we are still solving the same problems again and again. So what convinced you, what do you think could convince these people to share their experience on conferences?
Have you asked them? Because
He has.
right. So one of the things, okay, and they won't. Sometimes they're shy. So when I first started speaking, and so I'll share a little story, I'll make it short, is I was petrified to speak. I look at myself on this huge, big screen, and 20 years ago, I would never have done this. I would have just been scared. Lots of people just don't have the skills to speak in public. They have tried. So I deliberately went out to get the skills. It's like any other skill. So I joined Toastmasters. I went for 10 years. I still am petrified to get up on stage. But you start small. So start with a little user group. Start with your own team. Ask them to share with your team so it's not scary. And then ask them to do a user group. And then say, how about this conference? Start small steps like anything else.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions here? Okay. Okay, so I will ask a similar but like from the other way around question. So as a senior specialist, do you get sort of proteges often? I mean, as in, do you find that young people are willing to ask you for your expertise, or are they usually reserved to ask for advice?
Oh, that's, I think that sometimes they're shy at the beginning. So it's communication is always a two-way street. So often if I see somebody who's shy, I will approach them and just start talking. I might ask them just general questions, questions about the weather, questions about their team, questions about their job. Once people are comfortable enough, then I find that they are more willing to ask me quite often. So I said that, please, I'd like to get email, ask me questions. I have been teaching courses and talking for years, many years. And I think I can talk on one hand, 5, maybe, people who have actually taken me up on the offer. So I'm thinking that people don't want to bother me. And at conferences, when I'm there in person, I really try to make the effort to be available so that they're not intimidated, because I'm just a person like anybody else. I've just shared some of my ideas. I never count myself as an expert because I've met so many people that know way more than me. But I've been fortunate enough to be able to share my experiences. Does that answer your question a little bit?
That does. So I guess what we can take from it is we all, seniors and youngers, we have to be less shy, more brave.
Yes.
Yeah, less reserved. Courage is the key. Okay, well, round of applause. That's Janet Gregory, everybody. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Janet, very much. Bye. And that wraps up presentations for today. So a little bit of information for our on-site guys. Don't forget the parties tonight. It's in Vacares, starts at 8:30. So for those of you who are previous attendees, yes, it's the same place as last year. For those of you who don't know how to get there, all information is in the program, or you could just ask me, I'll tell you how to get there. Okay? That is all for today.